This is State Representative Betty Clark, and I'm feeling great.
Good. Testing. This is an interview with Representative Betty Jean Clark of the 55th District in the Georgia House of Representatives. This is Tuesday, July the 28th. The interview is being conducted by Diane Folks. Now, beg your pardon for that delay, but I want to start out with some questions about kind of family background, growing up and that sort of thing, and then move on into your legislative career. What year were you born?
1944.
And where were you born?
In Atlanta, here in Atlanta.
Uh-huh.
In a place called Dwells Infirmary. It was military hospital. My dad was in the Navy at the time.
Oh. Uh-huh. So he was stationed here.
He was not stationed here at the time, but that's where I was born.
Yeah, okay. And then did you grow up in Atlanta?
I grew up in Atlanta. I'm the third of 10 children that my mother had, 8 of us who survived, 2 who unfortunately died. And I have 5 sisters. I have 5 sisters and 2 brothers who are still surviving. I have to think about that sometimes.
Yeah.
It's been a long time. I'm the third child, the middle one in a way. But we have a large family. All of them are still around, and most of them live out in DeKalb County where I live.
So you're surrounded by family.
Yeah. Right. And my dad also lives out there.
Is your mother also still living?
No, my mother passed away in 1977.
Was she also employed while you were growing up? Or,
seldom employed. She was not a career person. She was pretty busy with 10 children, 8 children anyway, who survived. She did work occasionally, but for the most part, Daddy didn't want her to work. So she didn't stay employed very long.
Yeah. And you say he was in the Navy. Was he in the Navy during World War II and then left and went into another
Right. Daddy
occupation?
was a career, right, after the Navy, he was a career chef. As a matter of fact, he was one of the cooks, they called it at that time, at Grady Hospital. For 40 years. He retired from there.
Wow.
Yeah. He retired about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. Now, where did you go to school?
I attended David T. Howard elementary school. I went to, I can't even remember my elementary school. I must be getting a little old.
We'll move up to the high school.
Well, I attended, it was H.R. Butler Elementary School because that was the closest school to our neighborhood. And from there, I went to David T. Howard High School. After graduating high school, I started to work. And then during the time that I was working, I went back to school, and I went to Atlanta Area Tech for 3 years, took Secretary of Science, went to Georgia State for 1 year, not quite a whole year, but almost a year at Georgia State. And I've taken courses, so many courses at different institutions.
Now, what kind of work were you doing when you...
That is great. Immediately after high school, I worked at a pen and pencil manufacturing company, Scripto. It's no longer located where it was. I think they moved out of the state, but I'm not sure about where they are now.
Yeah.
I've worked numerous jobs. The U.S. Postal Service. I worked for some doctors who were gastroenterologists for a few years. I worked at several hotels. I worked in sales and marketing at Ramada Inn most recently. And as a matter of fact, I was the sales and marketing person for Ramada Inn until the hotel changed hands. And now it's, I think it's called Red Carpet Inn or something. But I've had so many different experiences in the job market. I can't recall all of them.
Yeah. And are you employed presently? In addition
Legislator.
to being...
Okay, other than that, I'm getting ready to get into a business of my own. It's a direct sales and marketing business, but I don't really want to go into it yet because I haven't gotten into it, but I'm working on that.
Good, okay. Now, moving, well, do you want to say anything about when you got married or how that,
Since I've been married 3 times, which one would you want me to choose?
well, whichever one you want to talk about.
Well, the reason that I got into politics, my husband at that time was Ted Clark, Reverend Ted Clark, and he just practically insisted that I get into politics.
Huh.
We had recently been married and moved to DeKalb County back in about 1969. In 70, there was reapportionment.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, the district in which we lived, well, the area in which we lived was reapportioned. And there was no representative in that area. There has not been a representative of that area prior to, there had not been, prior to that particular area because it was just reapportioned.
Mm-hmm.
So I ran for it, and I was the first person
Mm-hmm.
to be elected
A new
in that
seat.
that particular area,
Mm-hmm.
right? And prior to that, I had worked in the campaigns of several prominent people around Atlanta. Sam Massell, I worked for his mayoral campaign. I did some work in Maynard Jackson's campaign when he ran for vice mayor. I've done a lot of work in a lot of other people's campaign prior to my running. So when that new district was developed in DeKalb County, I thought that by my growing up in Atlanta and knowing a lot of people who lived out there, I may as well take a run for it. My husband really encouraged me though.
Yeah.
And I did in fact run for it, and I ran on the basis that by my knowing what the needs were in the district. I was pretty active in community kinds of things. By my knowing what the needs were, I would represent it just as well as anyone else. So I did run and I did win. I had 3 opponents that particular time, the first time I ran.
Mm-hmm.
I'm accustomed to having a lot of opposition, but I still managed to get by them. I had 4 opponents in my last race. I won it without a runoff.
Yeah. Have you always had opposition then every time
No.
you've run? Or just,
No, I've run without opposition a few
but
times.
the first time you
I
had
had
opposition?
3 opponents, and let's see, the second time I think I ran unopposed.
Uh-huh.
But from then on, I've had opposition.
Yeah. Could
Whether
you?
it's 1 or 2, or sometimes even 4 people.
Yeah. You actually answered my next question, which was how did you get involved in politics?
Mm-hmm.
But could you back up a little bit and say how you got into campaign work with the other candidates before you yourself became a candidate? What in your background kind of channeled you into that?
What channeled me into it was when I was a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
We had voter registration drives in my community,
Mm-hmm.
and I used to do volunteer work to knock on people's doors, even when I was not old enough to vote,
Mm-hmm.
to tell them where they could go to vote. That's how I initially got involved with politics.
Uh-huh.
That knocking on doors. So I learned it at an early age, maybe about 14 years old.
Yeah. Would this have been during the civil rights movement?
Well, it was in the 60s, yes.
Yeah. Was it voter education project sponsored or?
Mainly voter registration as a result of the civil rights movement, I think. You know, more than likely that's what it was centered around.
Yeah.
But I guess I was about 14.
Mm-hmm. And so from that you began to know political figures and.
I began to go to political functions and meet people who were in office or people who were running for office or and that sort of thing. And it really enhanced my interest in being involved in politics, but I never thought about running.
Mm-hmm.
I never thought about running.
Yeah.
I think the thing that had the most impact on me was when I worked in Sam Massell campaign for mayor. And I actually worked in the office on a daily basis. Of course, I worked in other campaigns too. Volunteered my services. I would go after work, later on. I would go to their office and do typing and other kind of clerical work for them.
Yeah. When you were knocking on doors, giving out information about voting registration, were your family involved in that also, or
not really?
Was it kind of community?
It was
connection?
just a group of teenagers who had volunteered. It was not family necessarily because, for the most part, my family is not that much involved in politics. Except to vote.
Yeah.
They don't get out and as a matter of fact, my family members, for the most part, don't volunteer in my campaigns. But that's all right. I have an awful lot of friends who do.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess what I'm trying to get is who got the teenagers into the voter registration project?
It was done through the
church
churches,
or,
right?
okay.
It was done through the churches.
Okay.
That they sought volunteers to go out and work in various campaigns. It was my minister at that time who encouraged me to get involved in letting people know we didn't get paid to do this.
Yeah.
No, this was volunteer.
Right.
Where to tell the people in my immediate community to go to register to vote or to vote even on election day.
Yeah. So that was one of your neighborhood churches then. Do you want to say what church that was, even if you don't say
I
the
believe
ministry?
it was the Greater Piney Grove Baptist Church.
Okay. So a Baptist church.
So I started out in AME church. I mean, it could have been the AME church. I'm not sure.
But it was church.
No, it could have been 4th Street United Methodist Church where I first started.
Yeah.
When I first started. But then I went to Piney Grove Baptist Church. But each of the churches had a lot of influence on my getting out and getting involved.
Okay. Now, you talked about your husband kind of getting you to run for office, and you talked about how there was a new seat open for the state legislature, but you also said something about you had never before thought about yourself running,
Right,
though you had worked for other candidates. And what kind of happened in your head to make you think that, okay, I can do it? Or was there something like that?
I don't know what happened except the fact that the other 3 candidates who were running were not, number one, native Atlantans. They had not gone to school in Atlanta or grew up in Atlanta like I had. And I felt that I had as great a chance as they did.
Yeah.
Because I could at least relate to the people in Atlanta who had gone to school with me, with whom I had grown up. I thought I just had a good chance eventually. And what was interesting was during the year that I decided to run, I was having a high school class reunion. I don't know which one now. I can't recall back. I could think back later. But we were having a class reunion, and we were having quite a number of functions going on at that time. And I got a lot of encouragement from my classmates. And they were saying, "Well, Betty, I heard you running for the House and all that." So it gave me encouragement.
Yeah. But you just figured out that you were qualified. And
I was just as capable as anybody else
Yeah.
who was running at the time.
probably more qualified given your roots in the city. Now, how did you organize your first campaign? Who were key people in your campaign?
My husband was a key person in it at that particular time. He did all of the organizing. He had experience in organizing campaigns or working in campaigns prior to my getting involved, having gotten involved. And what we did was, at that time, we didn't have campaign disclosure or anything like that. But he just went around and talked with friends of his, organizations that he knew would contribute to campaigns, and got contributions together and that sort of thing. And he actually handled all of the finances of my campaign. I didn't touch a dime. I didn't even know what he was. I knew what he was spending the money on in the final analysis, like mail outs, great big posters. We had billboard size. At that time, we didn't have an ordinance against the size of your billboards or your campaign material.
Yeah.
It could be as large as you could get it. And he and several friends of ours got together and built one of the biggest signs you've ever wanted to see. They are outlawed now, that size. But I had the photos taken and all that. So my husband really arranged my first campaign completely.
Yeah.
Everything. All I did was be the candidate when I would go to political meetings. Excuse me. The only thing I did was just talk to the people straightforward, let them know what I thought I should do for them and what I hoped that I could do. And I did develop a platform. I did have some input in developing my platform as to what I hope to accomplish. I knew that we had problems with our parks in that area. I knew that education was a problem in DeKalb County, and that a lot of parents were concerned about our educational system out there. At that time, we did not have a Quality Basic Education Act. I didn't promise that. I had no idea that that would come up, but of course I've supported QBE.
Mm-hmm.
And I just did the basic kinds of things to get the streets cleaned and just basic things that I knew people wanted done.
Yeah, kind of bread and butter. Are those called bread and butter issues?
You might call it that, because you know what you want, and you know what that sort of tells you what other people want. Basically the same things.
Did you seek support of groups in particular? You know, to
There
get
were very
endorsements
few organized groups in DeKalb County at the time that I
Yeah.
first ran. Subsequently, I have sought the support of certain groups. Our groups are kind of loosely knit in DeKalb, and they still are. At that time, there were only there were neighborhood groups that consisted of people who lived right in a 1 mile radius of each other. And their main goal was to socialize more so than to do political kinds of things. Of course, since then, I've been in the legislature 16 years, and since then, you have more politically active people in DeKalb County who do have groups who are politically active. I don't even now seek their endorsements and that sort of thing, but they do give me endorsements.
Yeah.
My name looks good on an endorsement list, so they just use it whether they ask me or not, and I don't mind it. It doesn't bother me.
Yeah. What kind of groups are they?
Some of them are church related, and some are just civic type groups who are concerned about things that need to be done in the area
And
where
are
they live.
kind of campaigning during election time for who they think will be the best.
That kind of.
Yeah. Did the Democratic Party play a role in recruiting or helping you in your campaign? Not recruiting you, because you said your husband recruited you.
No, at that time I was not involved in the Democratic Party of DeKalb. I had lived in Atlanta, and I think that I had only been in DeKalb County about 2 or 3 years at the time that I ran, probably 3 years. So I didn't even know the people who were involved in the Democrat Party, but I eventually learned them, from DeKalb County.
Yeah.
I had been involved with the state Democrat Party and had met some people from DeKalb who were involved in the Democrat Party. But no, they have not. They have offered me assistance like telephoning and things like that for my campaign, but I've never utilized their offer because I always set up my own phone bank if that's what I want to use, and I always hire my own people to work for me. I've never asked the Democrat Party of DeKalb to do anything for me.
Yeah. Was in your first campaign, was money a problem? You say your husband
It was not.
raised
No,
the money.
he raised. We had more money than we needed. I had
able to
never
do it.
finished the campaign with a deficit.
That's wonderful.
I'm glad for that. I've never had a deficit where I had owed a whole lot of people or something after my campaign was over.
Yeah.
We've been able to manage it pretty well.
Now, moving into office, you won your primary and then your election. Did you have opposition in the general election from a Republican?
No.
Yeah.
In my first election, I had a runoff election.
Okay.
There was no clear winner. There was a lawyer who came in second to me. And since I had not, there were 4 of us in that race, since I had not won a clear majority, we had a runoff. But in the runoff, I just swiped them completely away.
Yeah, and then in the general election,
I had no opposition.
Yeah.
I've had some Republican opposition, a guy who ran as a Republican, though, in years after that.
Yeah, yeah. How did you approach your first term in office? How did you kind of learn the ropes, so to speak?
I wish I could show you a picture that my grandmother kept up until she died, and it shows a picture of me in the journal, the Constitution, local newspaper, that says, legislator was shocked at the chaos, and I was. When I first came to the General Assembly, my first few days were just chaotic. I couldn't figure out, well, why are they making all this noise and what are they talking about? It was just chaotic. I thought everybody would just be sitting down like we were in a classroom or something and listening and learning, because I knew I wasn't the only new person there. I can't remember how many people came the same year that I did. Some of them are still here. But I just thought that it should have been quieter and more dignified. Since at the time that I came, the Speaker of the House was George L. Smith. And I'm not saying anything negative about how he handled it, but it was very chaotic. But he handled it with an iron hand. There's no question about it. He was in control. See, it didn't matter that all that noise was going on out there. He knew what was going to happen before it happened.
Yeah.
Now with Speaker Murphy, who came in after George L. Smith, it's gotten quieter, and since more women, I think, have come into the legislature. Because when I came, there were only 2 women, Grace Hamilton and myself. And after Tom Murphy became Speaker, he made a concerted effort to have a better decorum than we had in the past. Not that he never criticized George L. Smith. It was just that he recognized the fact, and because some of us went to him and told him, and I was one of the people, that it was just, it was too chaotic in there. We needed to quiet down. We looked bad to the media. When my constituents watched me on the news at night, I wanted them to see me looking like a lady sitting there and actually being able to hear what was going on.
Yeah.
And things have changed a lot since I first came, I tell you. I tell you, it's changed an awful lot.
Yeah. But would you consider that to be one of the first things that the women in the legislature were able to accomplish through the Speaker? Would you go that far?
Better decorum came about, I think, as a result of more women coming in the legislature. Some of them did make other complaints about certain things, like Kathy Steinberg asking for a ladies' restroom closer by and all that kind of thing. But things like that have happened. But I think that, let me tell you, when I first came to the legislature, some of the men who are no longer there used to chew tobacco and spit it on the floor, on the carpet. Well, that changed. They got those little
spittoons
boxes. No, they're not spittoons. They're trash cans, really.
Oh.
We have those now, but seldom you see anybody spitting in them. Most of the people who chew tobacco have their own individual tobacco cups, I call them. It's great. But I think that the decorum has changed and improved greatly because of the women being there, and the men, newer men who've been elected and all that, who seem to have a lot of respect for the women in the legislature, and all of them seemingly have a great deal of respect, period, for all of the women in the legislature. So that has changed the decorum. There's no more, you don't hear a lot of cussing on the floor like you used to. You don't hear those, you do still hear some of those off-brand jokes, but that sometimes takes you through the day. They still tell, some of them still tell those off-color jokes.
Yeah.
But you don't mind them. And every now and then they use a few 4-letter words in front of you. But then if one of the women looks at him and they'll apologize for it. But we have some who won't apologize even and say, oh, she's heard that before or something like that. But it's fun. We have to have something that makes us laugh, because it's very strenuous being in the legislature and having to study all those bills, as many as you can. It's hard work. It's tedious work. Sometimes we come at 8 o'clock in the morning. We may have a meeting, probably have a breakfast first, and then we get into session around 9 sometimes, and sometimes it's 10. And there are days when we stay until 7, 8 o'clock at night at committee meetings, and it's rough. It's really rough.
So it helps to kind of break all the
monotony
seriousness.
Well, not the monotony of it, but the hard work involved in it by having somebody tell you a joke or something like that. We do that. I guess people do that in all areas of work.
Yeah, I suppose.
You have to laugh. If you can't laugh in the General Assembly, if you don't have a good sense of humor, you're in trouble. So you have to laugh every now and then.
Yeah.
You have to laugh, I guess, to keep from just really breaking down.
From crying.
Keep from crying.
As the saying goes. When you, did you kind of meet up with some of the other legislators to learn how things were done in the legislature?
Let me tell you how I learned how the legislature worked. I kept my mouth shut my first year, and I sat back, I observed. I studied very hard. I studied bills and things. If in a committee meeting, I asked questions. If there was anything that I didn't understand, I would ask, well, why is this so?
Mhm.
I just learned by asking a lot of questions. I didn't necessarily meet with anyone.
Yeah.
Now, the speaker, when Tom Murphy became speaker, Tom met with the freshman legislators and sat down and gave us an orientation as such. Ask any basic questions that you might have, and he would answer them. And that's one of the ways that I learned some things. But I had some very dear friends in the legislature. Grace Hamilton, J.C. Doherty. I used to bug them half to death. I used to bug them all the time. But anything that I didn't clearly understand how to make a motion, but I studied the rule book.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think that I know more that's in the rule book than a lot of most of the average legislator, but that's only because I studied it. And I do know the rule book better than a lot of legislators. And I'm on the Rules Committee. This is my usual seat. I usually sit right here when we meet, when the Rules Committee meets, if we meet in this room. Sometimes we meet in the room across the hall. But I ask a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And I remember being termed that little militant black woman by some people. Well, I wasn't militant. I just felt that when I first came to the legislature, that the legislature wasn't being fair to black people, even though I represent black and white people in my district, in the district that I represent in DeKalb. I got neighbors who are white right up the street. But I felt my first goal was to try and change things for black people because I'm black, mainly because I'm black, not at the detriment to anyone who happened to be white who lived in the district. But I have very strong support from both sides. It doesn't really, that's not my primary goal at this point. But then I thought that what I've got to do, what you've got to do is you've got to make some changes for black people in the state. They're not being treated fairly. I looked at the bills that we were introducing. I found out that aid to families with dependent children, which affects more whites than blacks, really, and it still does. It did even then. I didn't realize that, but I said,
in absolute
we are not.
numbers.
Well, we're not funding aid to families with dependent children at the level that we should be. The state wasn't putting in a fair share. We still only funded at about 68 or 69% of the standard of need. So I was a little bit militant and a little bit angry about things when I started seeing them. I got very angry when some of my former colleagues who are dead now, who got up in the well of the House to talk against a birthday celebration for Dr. Martin Luther King. I was very angry when they got up and said he was a communist and those kinds of negative things. I've gone through a lot. I cried sometimes. I didn't want anybody to see me crying, but at times like that, I couldn't help the tears coming. I just have to get up and go out.
And that's more recently too.
Well, yeah, I don't mean when we finally passed it. I mean when we first started
Early
fighting
on.
for
Okay.
it. When I first got here in 72, 73, we were still fighting for it then.
Yeah.
But see, we just passed it recently. And I can remember some angry days, and I can remember just sitting there looking at some of my colleagues and saying, how can you hate people like this? How can you hate somebody like, what have I done to you for you to hate me? It's just that I'm black. So I've been through a lot. It hasn't been all that easy.
Yeah.
I'm getting a little bit loud now, I think. But anyway, I'm getting a little emotional because when I think about it, I still sometimes get angry.
Yeah.
And what is interesting, some of the guys who fought for civil rights type bills the hardest, now they are dead now, and they have had sons to come after them. Totally different. The younger generation. Those men's sons, I served with one of them now. The other one another one I served with, decided not to run again. He said it was taking too much from his family, but we've been through it down here. We've been through it.
Yeah.
And it hasn't gotten, the interesting part is while a lot has changed, a lot hasn't gotten any better. And I'm not angry. I'm not an angry person about it. I would just like to see it change. It probably won't change in my lifetime. I don't know. But we still fight the same battles. I've gotten to the point now where I don't just make AFDC one of my favorite kinds of things to fight for, basically because only the black legislators fight for it, and that's unfair.
Yeah.
Because it's not, we're fighting for black and white people, and the white legislators, for the most part, don't fight for things like that. They don't fight for AFDC as if it's only a black issue, and it's not.
Yeah.
And we've had, other black issues that basically black issues, discrimination type issues, I should say, rather than black issues, that we've had to fight for, like Department of, J.C. Doherty introduced the bill, which eventually established a department, and I can't even call the name of it, whereby complaints could be made by employees who felt that they had been discriminated against.
Was it a Fair Employment?
Fair Employment Practices Act.
Yeah,
that's what he
Fair
established.
Employment Practices.
He started working on that first, and then later on we were able to get some help from the Speaker and some other members of the House who were in prominent positions to help us to get that passed. Well, mainly J.C. Doherty did it, and we supported him, of course. But I'm just rambling on. You ask me something else you want to know, because you may leave here and not have some pertinent answers that you need.
You're answering, one of my questions was, what did you seek to accomplish starting out? And you've talked about one of your first things was getting the AFDC payments raised. Are there other things that, and you've talked about racial discrimination.
That was in the beginning when I first came, but right now, the things that I want to do is to try and make sure. Now, the state has done a good job, I think, in not having raised taxes, and I'm concerned about that. If you want to call it middle income, when you speak of middle income levels, everybody knows what they earn. Okay, the middle income levels. I'm not talking about middle and upper class people as such. Okay, most of the people that I represent in my district are, I would consider, middle income. The husband works, the wife works. In some instances, the husband may work 2 jobs. They are struggling. My goal is to lower the tax base for them, the amount of taxes they have to pay, and just provide generally a better environment for us to live in. I'm concerned about our environment, whether or not we have adequate water, what kind of water we're drinking, and that sort of. I've kind of graduated to some more pertinent things that my constituents have talked with me about. I want our streets to be clean. I'm very upset right this minute because the State Department of Transportation, and I need to call them before I leave this capital today, have not done anything about the exit points leading out to DeKalb County, where people have thrown all those cans and bottles. Well, the cans you don't have any problem with. We got a lot of can collectors around. But the trash and the debris that just sits around when you're exiting off the ramp, it makes me just sick when I exit. So I've already called the State Department of Transportation and asked them to please come out to DeKalb County and clean off our exit ramps. I'm not so angry with them as I am the people who put the litter there. But they have an obligation to clean it. That's their job. So that's one of the projects. And we had another project recently in the district that I represent. One of the things I don't want is, eyesores and debris and all of that. I like a real clean environment for the district. We had a very prominent businessman in DeKalb County who wanted to put the lot is already there. He wanted to put repossessed and abandoned cars on a lot right around the corner from where I live, right near homes on Fayetteville Road. And I went before the zoning board for the city of Atlanta. It's in the city limits, and also the council zoning committee. And we were able to stop it. So far it's been stopped. It's a vacant lot that sits right behind an apartment complex. Those are the kinds of things I work on a daily basis. As a matter of fact, I need to follow up on that because so far we've gotten it stopped. But it's not over till it's over.
That's right.
And right now it's not over because we don't know what the full council is going to do about it. But the council committee and the zoning board have both said no to the project. But then on the other hand, one of our aces in the hole, you might say, is that the State Department of Transportation does not want it either because they are going to have to use that section for the widening of I-20. They're getting ready to make I-20 a 6th lane. I think I'm right about that. Yeah. 6 lanes. So they will need that portion of that property where they want to put the dump trucks,
Yeah.
repossessed and abandoned cars. It's adjacent to an apartment complex that has high crime rate and a lot of problems. That's the worst problem I've got in the district that I represent, that particular apartment
Yeah.
complex.
Huh.
It has a lot of Section 8 people, and it has a lot of drugs and crime.
What is Section 8?
People who are subsidized, like on AFBC, they're
Okay.
subsidized.
Okay.
I don't have, that's the only complex I've got in, like that. But their rent is subsidized in some way by the federal government. I don't know if some of their money may come from the state, but I don't think so. I think it's all federal funds. But if they qualify, but there are a lot of drugs over there. I told them at the zoning board we did not want them to set up a motel, automotel. That's what I called it,
Yeah.
where young boys who may be on drugs in that complex could drag young ladies in there and then rape them and all that. So we fought against that, and it didn't work. They didn't approve it. But those are the kinds of projects I work on all the time.
Yeah.
I spoke at a church at a graduation exercise for young ladies who well, it wasn't in the district that I represent, and none of the young ladies lived in the district that I represent. And I told them that was Friday night. I said, you know, you can be what you want to be, do what you want to do, and have what you want to have, but you got to keep working. These are ladies, and some of them are my age even, 30s and 40s, who have children, who've been on AFDC, who don't want to be on it anymore. They have gone and taken a course through Southeastern Training Corporation, and now they're out in the work field.
Yeah.
And my speech was supposed to be a motivational speech, and I don't know how much I motivated them, but I felt good about that because there were only about 12 women in the class. That was great. 12 getting off welfare and all that was great to me because I don't like welfare. That's one of the things let me back up, when I first came to the General Assembly, that I said, and one of the ladies who heads a welfare rights organization got very angry with me because I said I hate welfare. And I said my family's never been on welfare. And I didn't, she misinterpreted that to mean that I hate people who have to have welfare, but I didn't. I was saying I hate the system as it is because it was allowing people to stay on it too long. You know, it was initially for the purpose of helping somebody till they could help themselves. And that's how I thought it should work. All right, temporary,
support.
not an ongoing kind of thing. But it turned out to be an ongoing thing. I know families where the grandmother was on welfare, the mother's on it now, and the child is on it, and the child has had a child who's still who's on it, you know. So it's just an ugly situation, but they'll have to change that, I guess, in Washington. Maybe one day I'll be up there and I can help in that change.
Maybe so. Let's see, there was. Oh, I know. I wanted to comment on, as a legislator, you actually represent your constituents by also going to other levels of government, or going to the state executive, the State Department of Transportation, or to local zoning, county zoning, city zoning. You know, you really interact with
what is interesting,
many governments.
Right. What is interesting is some of my colleagues say, Betty, you mean to tell me you actually go to Board of Education meetings? Of course I go to Board of Education meetings, County Commission meetings, City Council meetings, anywhere I need to go to get whatever's needed done for the district that I represent. I go to any of them. And many of the times that I go is not because of something like that rezoning or request to put those abandoned cars. You know, of course, who would want, if anybody abandons a car, chances are it's not a Cadillac or a Mercedes. And it's probably because they stole it in the first place. You just don't abandon your car. I got a little Thunderbird parked out there. I wouldn't dare abandon it.
Yeah.
But the point I was making is you have to interact with every entity within government. Now what we do, the reason that I have to do that, and even the judicial system, we vote on judges' salaries. When they want to raise, when our local judges want to raise, they have to come to us. We vote on their salaries. So if I have a constituent who happens to go to jail, I call a judge. And I think that it's you scratch my back and I scratch yours. Now, they don't always get the person out. It depends on what they've done. If a constituent of mine has been found to be a drug dealer, a rapist, or has committed a murderer, I don't try to help them. I swear I don't. I pray for them, but I don't go to any judge for those people. I just pray for them, and I pray for their parents. But if they've committed some little misdemeanor, and it's still, even though that's still a crime, but if it's a misdemeanor, like somebody stole a loaf of bread because they were hungry, I'll try and help somebody like that and make sure that they maybe find a way not to be hungry again by getting a job. So those are the kinds of things that I'm interested in, and I work on my legislative job full time.
Yeah.
They say we're part-time only because we're in session 40 days, but we were stupid enough, and I'm saying that literally, to vote to put an amendment to our state constitution that says we can only serve 40 days. We did that because when I first came to the General Assembly, we alternated 40 to 45 days. In even number years, we served 40 days, and in odd number years, I think that's correct, we served 45 days. We cut ourselves out of 5 of the days that we were legally able to serve.
Yeah.
And that didn't make sense to me after I found out what we had done. You know, you don't always know what we do until after it's over. And I'd like to see us serve at least 90 days in actual session.
Yeah.
But see, I work year-round. I'm not at this Capitol all the time. And it's not since I became a chairman of a committee, chairperson of a committee. I've always done that. I used to hang around this Capitol so much I can tell you just about every room in here, just about. But many of us work full time, like the speaker. The speaker has to go and do his law practice down in Bremen, Georgia, but for the most part, he's on call. I can pick up the phone and call the speaker anytime and say, well, look, I've got a problem, and, you know, whatever. And many of us do work full time. We work year round on legislative things. And I'm constantly having to go somewhere and speak. I spoke at a graduation Friday night for those ladies I was telling you about. I have spoken at numerous school graduations, elementary schools, even here in Atlanta on this side of town where I don't even represent.
Yeah.
Right down the street I spoke at Lena Jean Campbell Elementary School at their graduation exercise. And it's a lot of fun. I like speaking to children, younger people, or I like speaking in churches, one or the other. But I asked the children, I said, all of you in the audience who have decided that you don't want to be anything, you don't want to have anything, you know, you don't want to grow up to be anything great, stand up. And nobody stood up. I said, looks like we got a winning class. They applauded that. But I do try to encourage, you know, people, whether they're adults or children, in instances like that, because I'd like to see more black people decide that they can do whatever I can do.
Yeah.
And I came from somewhat of an humble background. My dad and mother were both at home. You know, we grew up with both our parents in the home. Daddy worked all the time, and my mother worked occasionally. But she was there for us, and so was my grandmother, my mother's mother, and my daddy's mother. They weren't in the home with us, but they were constantly there when they were needed.
Yeah.
And so I consider myself a lot more fortunate than the average black child growing up today. But we had a lot of love and affection around us.
Yeah.
Both our grandmothers. I've never even seen either of my grandfathers. But anyway, we had our grandmothers, and then we had our father and our mother. So we had a lot of love and affection around us. We weren't poor. We grew up in Grady Homes, which is, well, it's in that direction. You can't see it from here.
Yeah.
They're renovating them now. And we always had bathtub, hot and cold running water, food to eat, plenty of that. Oh my goodness. My mother's mother used to love to cook. Daddy's mother did too. But anyway, we had plenty of food. I didn't grow up poor. You know, that's a housing project, okay? But we always had our father. He wasn't living there pretending he didn't live there or any foolishness like that. Daddy worked all the time. He paid his rent and bills and all that. And we grew up differently, I guess, than a lot of the kids who are growing up now, and a lot of them who were growing up even when we were, because we didn't grow up poor.
Yeah.
We grew up in a lot of love, a lot of affection, and we had a lot of advice from both grandmothers, Daddy, and my mother.
Yeah.
So we were very fortunate.
When you've made a career now in the state legislature, when you started out running that first time, did you have any idea that you were going to come back term after term, you know, and make a career out of it?
I had no idea I would have been in the legislature for 16 years, but there's never been a job that I had that was forced to leave.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that anything that I wanted to do, I could accomplish it. I had a very positive attitude. The only job that I may have questions about was when I worked at the U.S. Postal Service.
Mm-hmm.
I worked for the post office, and I was one of the first women who was assigned to the. I could walk over there right now, down next to Richards. I was one of the first women who was assigned, to outgoing parcel post. I understand they've closed that now though.
Maybe.
On Forsyth Street.
Yeah.
But anyway, that I was one of the first women that they assigned to outgoing parcel post there in 1964. I think I went there. But I've worked in so many jobs. I have never been on a job that I had any problems with that I couldn't do.
Yeah.
But when I got in the legislature, I think I learned that this is where I needed to be, in the legislature, because I could help some people, I could cause things to happen, and I could have some influence in a lot of people's lives, and I like that. I have about 40,000 constituents, and they call me frequently, and anytime I can help them, whether it's with employment or whatever reason, I enjoy being able to do that.
Let me just stop this and turn it over here. Okay, we're back on now. Let's see. As an incumbent, now that you have been an incumbent, have you changed the way you campaign for office as you come up for re-election again? You say you've had opposition almost every time except once. But as an incumbent, do you do things any differently from?
I've learned to campaign a little bit harder as an incumbent, believe it or not. And that's quite the opposite from the average incumbent. They kind of slow down and, they feel that I've got the name recognition and I'm okay, so they don't campaign. So I have to campaign harder because it seems that I have more and more opposition. The numbers get large. In my last campaign, I had 4 opponents, 2 males, 2 females. So I had to work a lot harder. I had a campaign staff of 35 people. Well, campaign volunteers, 35 people, including little children all the way up to senior citizens. And we had to get out there and do some knocking on doors that we hadn't had to do in a long time. We actually went door to door in some parts of the community. Well, we earmarked the parts of the community where we really knew we needed to do some work, where people may not have known me, the more transitional areas where new people had moved in, or areas where I had not campaigned.
Has your district changed with reapportionment more recently?
Well, it's not changed. Reapportionment changed it, of course, and that's one of the areas that they added some new people and took some people away from the area, and they placed them in the 54th district, which is Juanita Williams' district. The district that she represents. But yes, I gained some new people, and that's where I'm getting more of my opponents from, the new area, because I never represented them. And the ironic part about it, some of these people who run against me don't even know that I didn't represent them prior to reapportionment. They think that I just have been neglecting them, but I didn't represent their area.
So that's you have to educate them.
Yes.
With more experience in the legislature, have you changed the ways you go about your legislative business? Could you describe that?
Not only do I have to change my method of campaigning and work a little bit harder, but the way that I've learned the best ways to get your legislation through. Now, I've introduced quite a number of bills that I couldn't get through because I have a tendency to introduce very controversial bills like AIDS. Bills relative to AIDS and bills relative to compensation for people who have been victims of crimes and things like that. You have a very difficult time trying to get that kind of controversial legislation passed.
I noticed the one on school prayer also.
Prayer in school. I jump on all of the hard issues, you see. So I have a difficult time, but now I managed to get a few passed which are not all that controversial. The prayer in school bill, at the time, the chairman, who was chairman at that time, said that it just didn't make sense for them to go through all of that controversial argument to try and get prayer in school, but he himself personally felt that there's nothing wrong with prayer in school. So I just jump on the hot issues, but let me tell you, I have been down here long enough, 16 years, to see that one year you can introduce prayer in school, and the next year somebody else can introduce it, and it'll fly right through the General Assembly. It may not be prayer in school, excuse me, but I've seen controversial bills that could not even get out of a committee, depending on either who introduced it or whatever, or the fact that there was a lack of public outcry.
Yeah.
And it failed that year, and then the next year it passed without a dissenting vote. I've seen that happen many times.
And sometimes you think that's because someone else introduced it, or because there was some kind of public outcry.
It could
that
be
made it more
right. Either one of those reasons. It could be either one of those
in
reasons.
favor.
Yeah.
How have you gone? You started to talk about how you've changed your ways of getting legislation passed.
I just go to the people that I know can get them passed.
Now you know.
Yeah, I bypass
kind of
all
who
of the
the players
foolishness.
are.
Yeah, I know who the real folk are, who
Yeah.
you have to go to
Yeah.
in the House and in the Senate. And of course, it doesn't ever hurt to have leadership people. And that's who I basically go to. I
So
go
you
to
know
the people
who those are.
the movers and the shakers. That's what I call them. I go to the movers and the shakers. There's no point in my going over to the Senate and talking with someone that I know can't get a bill out of a committee. I go to the committee chairman, and I go to the lieutenant governor.
Yeah.
So, I go directly to them, and it's a matter of their saying, okay, Betty, and I know it's done, you see.
Or they'll tell you no if they
can't do it. No, I'm opposed. If they're opposed to it, they're not going to do it either. So I just go to the key people. I don't have time to fool around with somebody who can't help me.
Yeah.
So that's a waste of time. So now I can go to those people.
Yeah.
Same with the Senate. They come to me, Betty, you're on rules, aren't you? Yes, I'm on rules. Help me get such and such a bill out. Well, I'm going to help them get that bill out. Whether it means I'm going to present the bill for rules or I'm going to vote for it to come out. I have probably close to as much seniority as any rules member, with the exception of 2 or 3, I think.
Are you now chair?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're chair of the committee also.
Not of rules.
Oh, not of rules.
I chair Human Relations and Aging.
All right.
But Bill Lee chairs rules. He chairs it. I mean, really chairs it. You should come to a rules committee meeting. You would love it.
Yeah.
It's more fun than it is work.
Are they open?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
all of
all
our
of them.
committee meetings have to.
Okay.
Yeah, they have to be.
Yeah. Is the Rules Committee a very important committee for the
One of
House
the most
business,
powerful
like it
ones
is
in the House.
Congress and
That's
the House
right.
of Representatives? Yeah.
The Rules Committee is one of the most powerful ones. During the last 20 days of session, we determine every bill that's going to be presented before the House.
Yeah.
We sit right in this room or sometimes in that room, and we decide as a committee what is going to go on the calendar.
How did you get on that committee?
Just requested it in writing. I just asked for it. I asked for my chairmanship.
Yeah.
See, it's just a matter of asking for it.
A matter of letting them know that
Speaker and
they're-
I are good buddies. It's not the committee that makes that decision. It's the speaker. And the speaker respects me a lot because I work pretty hard, I think. He's a pretty good man and he tries to be fair. I was the first woman he appointed chairman. He later appointed Grace Hamilton chairman, but then she lost her seat. And of course, Grace had been here much longer than I had been here.
Right.
But Tom Murphy is a pretty fair man to me. I think he's a great guy. But I just simply wrote him a letter and told him what I wanted. I wanted rules. Now I'm on health and ecology. I'm not excited about staying on that committee, but it's a good committee to be on. And I'm also on the special rules committee, which is comprised of people who aren't chairmen and stuff. That's supposed to be the real prestigious committee. Now that one's more powerful than just the general rules committee. And what else do I chair Human Relations and Aging. Those are the committees that I serve on. But that special rules committee try to make sure that everything goes the way it ought to go during our legislative proceedings on the floor of the House and that sort of thing. We make a lot of big decisions about what's going to be where and who's going to do what, whatever.
Yeah. So that affects policy.
That's the policy committee, basically.
The outcomes, because you decide
Yeah.
what will get addressed and what will not get addressed, what has to
That's
wait,
right. That's
or
right.
maybe never come. What about relationships affecting your political career? You've talked about your constituency already quite a bit. I mean, that they call you a lot and you answer a lot of requests and so forth from them. What about with the press? Do you have a relationship with the press that is, that influences what you do, or do you try to?
I know a lot of people in the press, but I don't.
Does that affect
the press doesn't
the way
ask
you-
me a whole lot of questions
Okay.
because I don't usually have any comments. But they seem to kind of like me, all right. They don't write a whole lot of bad stuff
Yeah.
about me. They just finished writing about the fact that I have an IBM computer or something like that at the taxpayer's expense. I don't mind that. I like the people in the press. I get along with them well.
Yeah.
But what they say and what they do doesn't affect me at all.
Yeah.
Even when they write a negative thing like that, like the fact that I have a computer. So what? I do have one. It's right on my dining room table now.
Yeah.
And they what else? They've written a few other negative things about me, but I don't care. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't affect me in
Yeah.
my district at all. My constituents don't even understand why they write ugly stuff about me when they
Yeah.
do. But most of the press people I get along with fine. They
Yeah.
don't write much bad stuff about
Yeah.
me.
What about the governor? Does what you try to do need the support of the governor, or is it more the legislative leaders that you look to?
Well, I deal with the legislative leaders. I have to go out the process of a piece of legislation goes from the House to the Senate, or from the Senate to the House, and sometimes it goes back and forth. By the time it gets to Governor Harris' desk, you've already, I guess, convinced him that he ought to sign it and not veto it. Excuse me, Governor Harris, unlike previous governors, and I think I've served under 4 of them, either signs a bill or vetoes, it's my understanding. He has the right to let a bill become law just sitting on his desk, but he's chosen to either sign it or veto it. I have never had Governor Harris to veto any of my legislation that I personally got passed. And I think this past session I may have gotten 2 bills that got to his desk and he signed them both. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, yeah. 2.
But it sounds like you interact more with the governor's people
The people who
in the House
will make
or
his
Senate.
people in the House,
His
as
floor
well
leaders.
as his people who are around him in his office.
His staff.
He doesn't, right, staff
Yeah.
people, he doesn't have time to listen to all of that rhetoric. And he gets so many bills on his desk to sign. Unless he hears from somebody who wants it vetoed, he's going to sign it more than likely.
Yeah. Goes
Or
with
unless
what
somebody on his staff says that it's bad and he shouldn't sign it. And usually they have heard from some group or organization who is opposed to it. Just like the state is being taken to court now because the governor signed the bill on parental notification when a young girl wants to get an abortion. I was very intricately involved in that bill because I wanted it passed. It is passed, but now the state is being taken to court as a result of the governor signing it.
Yeah.
And he did have a lot of pressure not to sign that bill. The
Was-
women's rights organizations and things like that were saying that it's interfering with the young girl's right. But if I've got a daughter 12, 13, 14, or whatever, underage, if she's going to get an abortion, I want to know about it because I want to be there. Even if she gets the abortion, the bill didn't say the child could not have the abortion. It says that the parents need to know, and I think they do. I still think that I was very emotional about that. The best speech I've ever made in my whole tenure in the General Assembly was on that particular piece of legislation.
So was this a really important one for you?
It was an
one
emotional
that you
kind
got
of thing
really,
for me.
Yeah.
I got really hyped up about it because I got to thinking about all of the young girls that I know who, not that many, but the few that I know who died from having abortions. And I got to thinking about some of my friends who have daughters who have almost become totally uncontrollable. And the fact that we would give them the right to go have an abortion if they wanted to, and the mother wouldn't have to know. Well, they already have that right, but now that that law has passed, it may change some of that.
Yeah.
I've got some friends who have some children that have just become uncontrollable, whether they are on drugs or whether alcohol, whatever they're on, and they become uncontrollable. They run away from home and things like that. They're not my close friends, but I'm talking about people that I know very well, and I know them very well, grew up with them or something like that. and it's just we're letting things get too far out of hand when we insist that a child should have the right to have an abortion without a parent's knowing it.
So you're seeing it as a way to kind of shore up the parents' ability to, get control of their children again,
Well,
their young children, their underage children.
Right, to bring them back into the fold and say, look, let's share this together.
Mhm.
That's most important. An abortion is a very serious operation. It's not something that you just go in today and leave tomorrow. I don't think. I don't know. I'm not a medical person.
Well, I think some do, but even so, it's a very serious.
It is serious, and it could cause
procedure.
death, and it could cause death, and it did, in fact, cause death of a young girl, and I didn't know her. But when I saw her mother on TV crying, I just felt so emotional about that.
Yeah.
That her mother didn't know. If her mother had known, it might not have been that way. She might have taken her, maybe even to Grady Hospital. Instead, the girl went to some private doctor who hatched her up twice to try and give her an abortion, and I think that was all.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I was trying to stop. I was very emotional about that bill.
What kinds of legislation have been of the greatest concern to you? And you may have already kind of answered these, and if you've talked about the welfare legislation, the one you just talked about. You've talked about how you pick bills that are hard to get through because they're controversial.
No, not because they're controversial, but I have a tendency to introduce very controversial bills.
End up being controversial, do you want to say anything else then about kind of the program you've been trying to get enacted?
Well, because I chair Human Relations and Aging, I'm very much concerned about older people. We had a bill this session dealing with Alzheimer's, and right now I'm doing some studying in that area as to what we can do in the state of Georgia relative to people with Alzheimer's, and what do we need to do?
Yeah.
How can we help those people? If I keep living, eventually I might have it, but it's not because of me I'm concerned. It's because I want to know, I see how helpless the families of Alzheimer's victims are. The incident that happened in Florida with the man deciding that his wife should die rather than suffer. So I don't know the extent that they suffer. I've never lived with anyone with Alzheimer's. And so that's one of the areas I'm going to be looking at for next year. I'm concerned about all of the problems of the aged. Okay, I speak at senior citizens, they call it. I call them seasoned citizens. Yeah, they just happen to be a little bit more seasoned than some of the other of us. But when I speak to them, I call them seasoned citizens, not senior citizens. I speak to a lot of those groups. We have several groups in DeKalb County that continuously call upon me to come and participate in programs that they are having, whether it's a breakfast, a luncheon, or whatever. And I enjoy that. My grandmother, who was 88, passed away last year, my mother's mother, and she died in my home. And ever since I've been old enough, well, even when I was a little girl, I always hung around my grandmother a lot. I'd go over to her house and sit and stay the weekend and things like that. And I guess just being so close to my grandmother, I used to give her an allowance and things. Being so close to her, I guess, helped me to have a better understanding of how people feel and what they hope for and all that when they get farther up in age.
Yeah.
She was 88, I think. Yeah, she was 88. So I'm glad that I chair that committee, but I'm concerned with all of the problems of the older people. I'm concerned about crimes against them. I helped to draft some bills that made it a felony to commit a crime against a senior citizen. Another representative, actually, it was her bill, Grace Davis, but I brought, well, Grace didn't even know her way around the Capitol at that time. I brought her down here, and well, she met me, I'm not sure, but we went to the Legislative Council, and we had several bills drawn, about 6 of them, I don't know if any of those bills actually got through the Senate. I really should ask Grace. I think at least one of them did, and it may have just been a study committee or something on problems of the aged. So Grace does serve on the committee that I chair, and we are going to be working on those bills again next year for the aged. We want to, and I regret using that terminology, aged, but our seasoned citizens is what I like to call the older Americans over 70 and all that. Because if you're under 70, that means you're still young.
Are there a good number of seasoned citizens in your constituency?
Yes, so, quite a number of them. Yes.
Is that also?
They're as sweet as they can be, and they come to every affair I have. I have a lot of like barbecues in my backyard and things like that for them to come.
Yeah.
And I enjoy that too.
Yeah.
But you learn so much from from the older citizens, the seasoned citizens. You learn a lot from them. So that's why I like to be around them.
Looking back and thinking of yourself personally, what do you consider to be your most satisfying accomplishments so far?
The fact that I've lived to be 43, and I didn't even accomplish that by myself. Let me tell you another thing. I think we passed a bill out of the committee that I chair for the handicapped, which I really thought was good. We passed one on handicap parking and passed another one on, well, the handicap parking one was for my county for the most part, but I think it affected both Fulton and DeKalb. But it deals with not only having to have that little drawing on the ground that shows a handicapped person in a wheelchair or something, but have the upright parking so people can clearly see it. Quite a number of people were getting tickets and having to pay fines up to $50 or more because they were parking in handicapped parking places. Sometimes they did it deliberately, but in some instances they couldn't see the marking. But we also passed another bill for the handicapped persons this year that dealt with their ability to have access to service station pumps. In other words, if they were paraplegics and could not get out of their car to pump gas, then at those stations where they have an attendant available, the attendant would be required to come out and pump the gas for them. Now, I know that doesn't always work because I purchase my gas at an Amoco station where there's usually only one attendant visible. So if I was handicapped, I'd be in trouble at that one, but it won't apply to stations where there's only one attendant. But whenever the attendant can come out, and I thought that was good, although it may sound a little bit frivolous or something because it's probably not enforceable or whatever, but at least we were making a statement that those of us who do have our limbs and everything should be more concerned about those people who don't. And I think basically that's the story we were getting over, because even if there's a station where there's one attendant, if I'm there pumping gas and someone comes in who cannot pump theirs, I'll pump it for them. That we're trying to enlighten people on the fact that we ought to be more helpful to one another.
That's good. Looking back, what would you say your greatest disappointment or disappointments have been?
In the legislature directly?
Well, thinking of yourself personally as a legislator.
If I think back long enough, I'll think about how disappointed I was when the King bill did not become law and the ugly debate that followed. I was very disappointed about that.
And you talked about that earlier too.
Right. I haven't had very many disappointments. Well, I'm always disappointed when any legislation that I'm in favor of fails, when it does not pass. But I can't think of very many specific bills or instances where I was just disappointed. Let me tell you why. I found out a few years ago that if you allow your failures in the General Assembly to really get to you, it can depress you for the rest of your life. I have seen too many members of the General Assembly have heart attacks and die worrying over things that they couldn't change. And see, my lifetime philosophy is the prayer that says, God help me to accept the things I can't change. If I can't change it, and if it's going to fail, I just come back next year and try again. I found that works. That would be on the earlier tapes too, that I've seen bills that no way in the world you're going to get it passed in 87.
Yeah.
In 88, it flies through without
Mhm.
a dissenting vote.
When
This
the
is
time
a
is
strange
right.
place.
Yeah.
Timing has to be right. And not only that, the people have to be right.
Yeah.
Because if you don't do the right homework on your bills, you're not going to get them passed
Mhm.
anyway.
Mhm.
So you have to get your bills, you have to let people know you're going to introduce certain legislation in advance.
Mhm.
And let them have, in their mind
Mhm.
that, well, Betty's got such a, whatever bill
Mhm.
it is, and she wants me to support it. So you have to do your homework. That's what
Mhm.
they call it. If I'm going to introduce something that's controversial, my letters will go out prior to the General Assembly starting. I
Yeah.
can't wait till January
Uh-huh.
to ask somebody
I
to
see.
support something controversial. I
Yeah.
have to ask them in October and November.
Mhm.
And then I have to follow up with a phone call in December around
Mhm.
Christmas time when I wish them a Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
I tell them about my bill
Uh-huh,
again,
uh-huh.
remind them. So come January, they're ready to either vote it up or vote it down, and that's how it works.
Yeah. Looking ahead, what do you want to accomplish? Might be in the next session, or it might be kind of, your
I want to write a
big
book.
goals.
I want to write a book on my days in the Georgia General Assembly. I can't wait to write it. It's going to be a bestseller. I tell you, some of these things I've seen in this General Assembly, I can't wait to tell on some of these people. I'm only kidding. I don't want to expose anybody or exploit anybody or anything like that, but I do one day want to start working on a book.
Mhm.
And after 16 years, I'm looking at the fact that, it won't be long maybe before I won't be around this General Assembly
Mhm.
anymore. But I have had such exciting experiences in it and met such exciting people. I want the world to know about it.
Yeah. This might connect up with the next question, which is about being a woman in the state legislature. What do you think your impact has been as a state representative, generally perhaps, but also as a black woman in the legislature, in the state legislature?
I guess the impact has been great. It has told a lot of things to a lot of people. When I first came to the General Assembly, most of the men in the General Assembly didn't say anything to me.
Mhm. I
I was only 28 years of age. I was black, young, fairly attractive at the time, and it wasn't about. I didn't come down here to look good for anybody.
Mhm.
It wasn't about that. But I'm just saying I'm giving you a general description of who I was when I first came. And most of the men just ignored me. They acted as if I wasn't, unless I spoke up, nobody said anything. And sometimes I used to speak to some of them who didn't speak back to me.
Sounds
And-
unfriendly.
Well,
Was it
just
unfriendly or
ignoring
just
me
kind
because they knew, number one, I was a fresh person, freshman or whatever you want to call
Mhm.
it. Number two, I was a woman. Number three, I was black. Well, it may not be in that order.
Mhm.
So I was basically ignored.
Mhm.
I had to make myself seen and known, okay? But it took me a couple of years to do that.
Mhm.
I mean, really a couple of years before people started recognizing me. Now I'm referred to as Miss Betty by anybody who refers to me
Uh-huh.
usually calls me Miss Betty.
Uh-huh.
And I appreciate that respect. But your initial question dealt with
Your impact.
what impact have I had?
Mhm.
And I think I've had a tremendous impact. I'm the only woman who chairs a standing committee.
Uh-huh.
There's no other woman who chairs a standing committee, black or white.
Mhm.
So that impact has to be great. I'm the only one who serves on the special policy committee.
Mhm.
I've shown them that I know how to read real well. I know the rule book better than most of
Yeah.
the people in the General
Uh-huh.
Assembly. So that's the impact that I've had. And not only that, I have not been selfish.
Mhm.
Newer members of the General Assembly, both black and white,
Mhm.
have come to my desk, bent down on their knees and said, Betty, I need to know this or that
Uh-huh.
or whatever.
Yeah.
And it didn't have to do with anything that was in my committee. They came and asked me, they still do it.
Yeah.
When we're in session. And that's the impact.
Mhm.
Passing on the information that I've
Mhm.
learned to the newer legislators. I love it when they
Mhm.
come to me and ask me questions. It doesn't make me feel like I'm better than they are or bigger than they are, but that I've been here long enough that I ought to be able to help somebody else.
Mhm.
You see? So
Yeah.
I've taken quite a number of the newer members under my wing, and I've told them, anything you need to know or don't understand, come and ask me. Don't sit and vote ignorantly on
Yeah.
this legislation. Ask me if you're not sure about it. I still have a tendency to study the bills.
Mhm.
I read a book by a senator from California who wrote the title of it is, "What Makes You Think We Read the Bills?" The fact is, most legislators don't read the bills. A lot of them don't know what's in it.
Yeah.
Unless it came out of the committee that they serve on. They have no idea what the bill is all about. They just sit there and vote on it ignorantly.
Are they following cues from other?
Many times
people,
that's what they do.
Yeah.
They look at that board when it lights up. And if a certain person voted against it, you see a red light, somebody else might vote against it too. Because they respect that person's vote. And they figure that that person has a reason for voting against that bill. Now, I found myself being the only person voting against the bill many times in 16 years. And I just love it, you know. I don't mind it at all.
Nobody's following
But if I vote against it, right, I'm the only one voting against the bill. The speaker would sometimes just look straight out there at me and like, "What's your problem, Betty?" But I read the bill, so I found the flaw in it that I didn't get the right answer about it. Because I usually, if I find the flaw or something that I'm not sure about, I'll go and ask the author of the bill, or I'll ask the lawyers that we pay those decent little salaries around the corner to tell me, what does this mean? And if they tell me exactly what it means, and if I don't like it, I vote against it. I just sit there, and while I'm voting against it, I'm just busy writing something, a letter or something. Don't care anything about it. Just
punch
no.
the button, no.
And then they'll come over and say, "Betty, why'd you vote against that bill?" And then I'll explain it to them. "Why didn't you tell us in advance?" Didn't have time. The bill came up too soon. You should have asked too, like I did. So we have it's one thing about it. Whenever the Lord calls me, it won't be because I let anything in this legislature get me down. I've learned to have a sense of humor about it, even serious things sometimes, you know. Like in the case of being the only one voting against the bill. I haven't done it a whole lot of times, but there have been a number of times in 16 years that I voted by myself. And it's fine. Sometimes I voted against bills that were probably good because I knew they were going to pass, you know. But I just did a protest vote because the person who authored the bill voted against one of my bills. You know, we do things like that every now and then. But you know the bill's going to pass. It's not that I'm against it. But we have a lot of fun doing stuff like that. I'm not the only one who does that either.
How have things changed for women in the legislature? Or have they changed for women in the legislature, and how?
They are basically the same, you know, like when I first got here, the men mostly ignored me. But I had to, in a sense, prove myself that I could study, that I could understand the legislation, that I could work hard, the same things that some of them can do. Not all of them work that hard, really, but for the most part, they do work very hard. And things have changed for women in the sense that there were only two women when I got here, Grace and myself. And what has changed is women, I think our colleagues who are male have realized that we can work hard as they can work when it comes to legislation. We can attend those meetings, and we can, you know, the committee meetings, and we can do our own research, or we can have it done properly, appropriately, to present a bill on the floor of the House. That's one of the things that I like about most of the women in the House that I can say have been here a while. When they get in the well of the House, they are very well prepared to present their legislation. Even more so in instances than some of the men. They're prepared. They've done their homework. They can answer your questions. Now we have some women who might get in the well and then refuse to answer questions. We have men who will do that. So there's no difference. I don't see I don't understand why there has to be a difference made in how the women operate in the legislature as opposed to how the men operate, because we have some women who operate like the men, same as the men do, men who operate like the women do. I mean, it's gender has nothing to do with the legislature, in my opinion, except, you know, we wear dresses and they wear pants. That's the only difference I know. Because if you really want to be successful, all you have to do is really do your homework, and you gain the respect. You know, answer their hard questions. And then if you don't want to answer them, if you understand the parliamentary procedure, you can not answer them and they'll think you answered them.
Use it.
You see, it's a way to do all of that. You don't have to get angry with anybody. And if it seems that they are browbeating you, you can handle that by being real gentle with, well, the gentleman is correct. However, so and so. Don't let them get you angry.
Yeah.
I've never gotten angry in the
Mhm.
well of the house,
Uh-huh.
ever.
Yeah.
Once they see they're getting you angry, see, they really
Mhm.
mess with you. So
Right.
it's just it's knowing, studying the rule book, knowing the parliamentary
Mhm.
procedure, doing your homework,
Mhm.
studying those bills. That's what makes for success, whether you're male or female.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it.
Has it helped to have more women in the legislature? You mentioned that when you first came there were only two.
It doesn't matter that
Of you
there are more,
now.
but the only thing is it has enhanced the legislature because, as I
Yeah.
said, we've got some women who are just as hard working,
Yeah. Who
and
were
it
really
wouldn't
good
matter whether they were
legislators.
men or women,
Right.
right? They're
But they're
good
good-
legislators.
yeah.
They
Yeah.
do their homework. They work hard. Some of the women work harder than some of the men. Eleanor
Yeah.
Richardson, Kathy, and those
Uh-huh.
people,
Yeah.
and Mary Jane Gaylor. When they get on something, I mean, they're on it.
Yeah.
When they get on their soapbox,
Uh-huh.
they preach, you know.
Uh-huh.
But they work very hard at whatever they're interested in. Now, I have not been interested that much in dealing strictly with women's issues,
Mhm.
or like the Equal Rights
Mhm.
Amendment or displaced homemaker.
Mhm.
But we have enough women now that everybody can do their own thing.
Mhm.
Eleanor's really interested in a displaced homemaker and health issues.
Yeah.
Mary Jane is interested in the Equal Rights Amendment, and so is Kathy Steinberg.
Mhm.
So everybody does their own thing.
Yeah.
But I have not, committed myself just to deal with
Mhm.
those type issues. I just don't. I vote for all of them
Yeah.
now. I vote for their issues
Yeah.
because they are for women. But
Mhm.
I don't make that my priority.
Yeah. Though aging issues, since there are more and more older women
Mhm.
than men, may be an issue where it becomes a women's issue. Quote,
Well, if
unquote,
it does,
you
I
know.
can deal with it. I
Mhm.
don't have any
You're
problem
already
with dealing
working
with
in
it.
that
I
area.
just don't make it my primary
Yeah.
area to
Mhm.
work. That's
Mhm.
all I'm saying.
Right.
But I support all of the issues that are for women. I've never voted against anything that was for women, like the Equal Rights Amendment
Yeah.
or anything that has been presented.
Mhm.
But we have some women, everybody's got
Mhm.
their own bag. Some women who want to specialize in those areas.
Right.
Now, I'm thinking about the aging as a whole, men
Mhm.
and women.
Mhm.
And of course, there are more women who are in the category of aging than there are men.
Mhm.
But I want to help both sexes, both
Right.
of them, in any way that I can. And that's
Mhm.
what I'm looking at now for January,
Yeah.
to see what I need to introduce to help the older people. Alzheimer's is not the only issue that I'm looking into.
Mhm. That's my last question. Is there anything that you would like to end with?
Okay, I'd like to ask you this. You
Okay.
can turn that off if
Oh,
you
okay.
want.